Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Sam. I am the Health Education Project Specialist at the Maxwell Eleanor Blum Patient Family Learning Center at Mass General. Rebecca, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Thomas, and I am one of the summer interns at the Maxwell Eleanor Patient Family Learning Center.
Thank you. Today's program is part of our MGfC Family Centered Care Series, a special collaboration between the Blum Center and Mass General for Children. Before we get started, I just want to go a few items with you all. Please note that today's session is being recorded for educational purposes. If you're interested in viewing the recording, you may visit the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Please note that you're in listen-only mode. Everyone has been muted so you can hear our guest speaker today. If you have any questions for our guest speaker, you may use the chat feature, which is located at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time for them in the end. Only Blum Center staff and our guest speaker will see your questions. Please do not share any personal medical information or questions in the chat. If you have a personal medical question, please ask your doctor. Lastly, at the end of today's session, you'll be directed to a brief survey, which we'd like to ask you to help us complete. Your feedback is important to us as we plan future programs. All right, so next I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, who will introduce you to all today's guest speaker.
Dr. Antilla Giovanulu is a child and adolescent psychiatrist and currently serves as medical director at MGh's Basel Clinical Research Program for Autism Spectrum Disorder. He also serves as director of psychiatric services at Shriners Hospital for Children's Boston. Even though he has been heard and seen in many platforms talking about media and effects of youth, he has been humbled time again by his two teenage sons at home.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you for having me. And this, I think this discussion comes timely, if I'm not terribly mistaken. Tomorrow is Digital Media Day, or Digital Media Awareness Day. June 30th is the designated date, I guess. And so I think this I hope will be a timely chat. Well, when we're talking about digital media, as you mentioned, I am time and again write about it, talk about it, but when all is said and done, it is being perhaps like the tallest of the seven dwarfs. It's a huge area, and is time and again it makes us face problems or things that we had not thought about before, and we get constantly reminded by its presence, reminded by risks that are inherent to the digital media use, or excessive or problematic use of it. So this is an ongoing. Every day by day we're learning new things about it, and it is a social activity. This is a picture I cherish. It's one of those is my son and with his friends, and they have a sleepover, which they call it a box over. People bringing over their consoles, setting up, hooking up to screens, and then play all together in the same room. It is a social activity for most of the kids, playing the video games. And social media as well. Being active on the social media is an extended way of the communication for most kids. And as such, the digital media or video game industry particularly has soared over the last 30 years, 30 plus years since its conception. And it's now 15 times as of 2021 of what it was back 30 years ago. And in 2022 numbers, I think released, are above now $200 billion mass, the whole market value. And so as it is such growing in size, it is so it's access and use. In in 2015, for example, according to the surveys, the 8 to 12-year-olds or tweens were spending more than 4 hours a day on various forms of electronic media or digital media. And and at the same time, the adolescents or the teens were spending more than 6 hours, 6 hours and 40 minutes a day. And that had only increased in 2019. Same survey when it done, they found that the children bumped up a little bit, and so did the adolescents of use of their of access of electronic media, screen media, and the chunk of it goes to watching videos, video gaming, online social network, and content generation, which is slowly increasing as now kids record themselves or they play and then post it on share websites such as YouTube or what have you, like Vimeo and all. And but then this is as of 2019, and then COVID happened in 2020. The use of or access to screen media just soared with social isolation or social distancing, that is, and which ended up for a lot of people in social isolation. What we see then is a major uptick in the access to video games and online social network participation, and the time spent on these just increased and soared. Now, where is how much is enough, or is there a sweet spot to media use? And that is in major part an elusive question. But when we go with the cross-sectional surveys and surveys of media use, well-being assessments, and all, what we come to find is it's about an hour or so. Within an hour or two seems to be the sweet spot. And kids who engage 3 hours or more on social media or video games, they tend to express more dissatisfaction and, interestingly, poor peer relations. They tend to do more often. And when we look at what they do when they're online, a lot of teenagers and adolescents, they use the internet for information seeking, for finding answers to questions that they find difficult to ask or intimidating to explore with someone else. So more than 9 out of 10 surveyed had mentioned that they had sought mental health related information, if not help, online. The relative anonymity that being online sort of affords an adolescent, which I mean by, you can, be behind the screen and write things, say things, or react to things without being seen, and it affords you a certain anonymity, and which I call as relative anonymity, because it's not that anonymous. I mean, if it's it can be still be chased or looked, but this aspect of it seems to be really fueling or attractive to adolescents using the online social media and internet. And what are the terms and what are the mental health related matters are they looking for, the adolescents, teenagers? It's so about 42 million times a year the word cutting has been searched, and unfortunately, here lies the perhaps a risk and danger that while an adolescent might be looking for answers to difficult questions, the answer they find is not necessarily refined or supervised or checked. And so 9 out of 10 times their search that led to a site that is not endorsed by a health organization or institution, and which runs a risk of getting false information and myths. And so the it's important to keep an eye on what kids around us are looking for and looking at and finding out. And the over the time, we see an increase in the prevalence or incidence of anxiety and depression among adolescents, especially in the last decade, particularly since the COVID pandemic. And there is an increase in incidents. There's an increase in seeking consultation with healthcare providers, and the access to online social media can mitigate some of these problems by way of fear of missing out, and then the compulsively checking, feeling more lonely, or the ending up through following these under-informed or mal-informed websites to end up in on communities or online places which may confound depression or anxiety by the information there, or with ill advice. And in addition to this online information seeking, there's the video game play and excessive time spent on it. It does take away from more corrective experiences or nurturing experiences rather, and it may perpetuate an anxiety or a depression that the child may be experiencing. And what we see also is this behavior of sexting, that the 1 out of 8 teenagers had reported that they have sent what is sexting? Sending of a nude or compromising videos and pictures and images, files through mobile devices or through internet. And 1 out of 8 teenagers had reported that they had done sexting at least once. And 1 out of 20 have reported that these videos and images ended up in places that they were not intended to go. So what we know so far is that the unsupervised internet use and coming with the lack of rule setting or not able to set rules, and a child with a poor self-esteem and bodily dissatisfaction, they are more likely to engage in sexting. And among those kids, there's an 3 times increased risk of suicide or suicidality. And it's mediated by the emotional anxiety and depression reactions to what is experienced. Another layer is the cyberbullying, which is defined as the degrading, so the host of things, including messages or sent directly to the person or posted on websites, social media that are degrading or threatening, or posting a person's personal information or false information, rumors or lies about that person, posing to the folks as a victim, and then acting posing as the person and then acting in embarrassing ways and disseminating that information, and then or posting embarrassing pictures and videos. And the 1 out of 4 teenagers have reported that they had been subject to cyberbullying, and about 1 in 6 actually have been on the dishing end of it. It's more common, unfortunately, to have a girl or a child or adolescent in LGBTQ community or non-conforming community, they do to experience or be victimized or be targeted. The peak age of the risk happens around age 14. And it can be followed by obviously depression, anxiety, bouts, suicide, self-harm thoughts, and it can also, interestingly, right, it is associated with the same in the perpetrator. So not only the victim is at risk as a result of, but a person with similar like depression or anxiety problems that are unaddressed can be at more risk to bully others as well. So and when it occurs, the cyberbullying or any form of bullying, it is readily associated with worsening depression and mental health problems. And there's been an increase in suicide attempts, about like 5 times increase in suicide attempts among kids who have been targeted by bullying or cyberbullying. About the online social media. Now, there's the other digital media, which is the video games, and which is a huge, as I said, more than $200 billion industry. And over years, for the longest time, we have seen and concerned about the content, the violent content on these video games and how it is affecting the kids or players. And what the research, though, has been not conclusive, has been not able to show a clear link between violent video game play and aggression or violent behavior. Although there might be a small group of people and children and adolescents who might be at risk, but it cannot be said for the general population. But there are other problems associated with the video game play. And it's not necessarily in the content, perhaps, but the circumstances of the video game play. What do I mean by that? First of all, it is something that takes time, right? The video game play doesn't happen in vacuum. When I play, it takes time, and it takes that time from something. Something's got to give. It's the athletic participation, academic participation, scholar work, reading time, and all. And what we've seen over time is in kids or children who play video game longer than their peers, they oftentimes end up, it's associated with lower GPA scores or lower SAT performance at high school. And when looked at, only 50% of the time, the household may have a strict rule that is enforced on video game duration. And this problem with this academic problem that results from seem to result or correlated with prolonged video game play, doesn't require that kid to experience or be defined as addicted to the video. So certainly it is the time that it consumes, takes away from other activities, seems to be the problem here. And so we think about, okay, it's in summertime when kids are on vacation, on break, are they going to maybe have more time for other activities other than video games? But what we see is that during the school vacation time, like right now, the children use the sort of school-related activities like studying or reading or less, really less than desired is that they are putting in. That all of that time is consumed mostly by video game play. And even in households where there are rules, around video games or access to them now, following acquisition of following when a new gaming system is purchased or a new upgrade is obtained, regardless of having rules or not, the academic performance of the kid seems to drop in the ensuing 4 months. And mostly affecting or specifically affecting their reading comprehension skills. Something that we need to keep an eye, and we'll come back to this at the when we talk about the recommendations. Now, the sleep is another displaced thing with media use, electronic media use. And although we don't know what exactly sleep does for the body, we know what it does when it, what the absence of it or insufficient sleep does. It's associated with obviously fatigue, but anxiety, depression, cognitive problems, attention problems, focus problems, mood changes such as irritability, and then it with the consequences associated. And what we know is that yes, as the age grow, as with the person grows, the amount of sleep needed may reduce, and not everyone exactly needs the same amount of sleep. But what we know is that 3 out of 4 adolescents, 3 out of 4 adolescents are not sleeping enough, and that they are operating with an accruing sleep debt. They're not sleeping enough, and this is becoming, I think, a public health issue. These digital screens, they do, they're present in our kids' life from infancy to adolescence, and affects the sleep at all this and all stages. For infants and toddlers, that the total sleep time has correlated with the touchscreen device availability. Same for the school-age children. When the sleep duration is increased, like restored for each hour, there's about 10 to 15% of reduction in the problem behaviors, right? And each hour increase in access, there is a 1 in 20, like there's some increase also in the social problems, behavioral social problems the kids experience. And so this is the all types of screen. This is to say that all types of screen activity, it correlates with insomnia or sleep problems, depression, and it correlates negatively with the weekday, it's like the sleep duration, particularly during the week. So more screen access, more problems with sleep, and less rest, and more problems with depression. Then why is this? What is mediating this? The screen time when looked at these different devices, it's the portable electronic devices is with access to portable electronic devices such as the game, like the handheld games or smartphone and tablets. Those seem to be the more associated or more primarily related to this increase in sleep problems. Not to say other screens are better. No. It is because these screens are much easier to sneak in, much easier to use at the time, at bedtime, for example. And so it's, you can't really grab a whole like desktop into the bed, probably, right? I mean, if you could, if you tried, you could probably, but it's these small devices that get that sneak in and get used. And as a result, when the video game happens right before the bedtime or within the 2 hours of bedtime, what we know is it takes longer to fall asleep. It's and kids end up with a shorter sleep time. They sleep less, and when they're sleeping, it is more interrupted sleep. Even there are micro awakenings, so the sleep is not fully restful, and as a result, there is the daytime tiredness and fatigue. Now, what we also know that the next day, cognitive or memory performance or memory tasks start to suffer following the sleep of that, following a night with video game or electronic media access within an hour or two of bedtime. So now here I'd like to bust some myths. So I'm sure we all have heard a kid or two say, I play video games to fall asleep. Well, while that is true, like, 1 in 4, like 7th grader have said that they play video games to fall asleep. But when looked at in research, when looked at those kids, critically looked at the when a kid is playing a video game compared to reading a book or even watching a movie, the brain recordings, when they're examined, those who play a video game at the time do not record or manifest sleep onset associated brain wave changes, that there is something inherently being absorbed and kept active, and makes it more difficult for the child to fall asleep. So it is not that you are playing video games to fall asleep, my friend. It is that your brain is giving up and finally falling asleep despite your playing. The other one that I hear a lot is so we shatter that myth, I hope. The other one I hear is about the statement that I catch up on my sleep on weekends. Okay, that I could sleep fine, less, but I'll catch up on weekends. And it's been voiced by a lot of teenagers, and so you're not the only one to hear it from yours around you. But when we look at the numbers of the amount of sleep, the amount of sleep that the kid gets during the weekend, the weekends, yes, they do sleep a little longer on the weekend, but the amount of time that they recover by that later sleep is nowhere near the amount of time that they have lost. That is, there is, no weekend catch up. So what mediates these? It's the research clearly shows availability of electronic devices and screens in a child's bedroom is directly correlates with more likelihood of having sleep problems. And not only the number of devices determines, but the kid engages with, most kids seem to engage with multiple devices at once. So like while watching something, playing on the phone, or while listening to something or music or whatever, playing on the phone, or chatting with a friend with a video chat while playing on the console. And so the media presence of the electronic media in a child's bedroom, it's associated with sleep problems. They tend to be used more for longer hours and longer times, and so ensuing sleep problems occur. And when you have screens and at night, the next day, as I mentioned earlier, the memory tasks seem to struggle. There is a restorative effect of sleep that primes and prepares the brain for the next day's work. So we know then is that we video game within 2 hours of a bedtime is problematic. Long video game play at night and is related, leads to sleep problems, and again the difficulty with or problems with attention task and memory task the next day. So it seems that the video games, they concern perhaps move from, we should monitor the content, certainly. We need to also keep an eye on other problems associated with it. And like the academic problems, cognitive problems, sleep problems, social disconnect, depression, anxiety, obesity, but when we look at these, it seems that the effect of the video game on these domains is primarily and mostly mediated through its effect on sleep. So to the extent that the sleep is disrupted by the video game or social media access, that determines how bigger problems are coming. So that might be a good place to start from then, when we think about how to address this with our kids at our homes. So first is that we, setting limits and expectations. And unfortunately, not, many parents try, but find it difficult to enforce or keep these rules in place. And when there is, in families where the parents, use less screen time or prioritize sleep more, the children in those households tend to have less problems with the media access, less problems with sleep. So it does matter what parents do. But many times we parents, we do feel because of this, the push of this media, setting a rule, putting a rule in place, it starts fine, but it comes apart, or it's really difficult to enforce. So, and many times I do hear from friends and parents around me this, what do I do? It's pointless that I put it finds a way to sneak or ends up in an argument, a discussion all the time, and it's really difficult to maintain. So, well, where to start from then? Here is an issue that other researchers have identified, is that it does matter what rules you start with. Rules on day of the week of media access, like weekdays, weekends, and like rules on the media content, they have little or no effect on how much time the child spends on this media. But it is a specific limit on the amount and the specific limit on where that media is used and accessed. Those two are the key components. And unless those two are addressed in any plan or limiting, it doesn't work. So I've often mentioned this. So the rule of twos, then these two, and for how to ascertain, how to set efficient, effective rules and keep with them, it follows a rule of twos. One is that we get, screen time limitation, right? And sleep protection needs to be the goal. When those two, or physical activity, increasing physical activity. So like having this screen time limitation with sleep protection or physical activity encouragement, one of the, it gives the best results, it seems. In terms of the academic achievement has increased, has improved when these rules were set, according to one study. But where do we start that? So where is the median? We got to move and find a way to move. If not immediately, have an explicit plan in place, or come this day, we're going to move it to, so that everybody in the household, including the child, can prepare themselves for that, towards that day. And moving the screens out of bedrooms to a place where there are two or more people. So like the family room, dining room, kitchen, wherever the family is hanging out. So bringing it to there. Because as I mentioned earlier, devices in bedroom, they correlate with the sleep problems. And sleep problems predict other academic, cognitive, depression problems. The timing of the play, like when, eliminating the digital media access together, including the video games, within 1 to 2 hours of bedtime. That's going to help. But having a curfew, having a lockbox, but everybody needs to do this, not just the child, but the parents too, because it matters what parents do, to avoid sleep problems and keep to these rules on school day, snow day, no matter what day. Because remember, the 2 hours, within the 2 hours and long play problems. About the long play, how long is enough? The limiting, so it's age dependent. So for children under 2 years, like infants and toddlers, it is best to limit it to personal communication, such as a FaceTime with grandparents or a parent who's away, and in using it, or as much as possible, limiting it to that. For preschool age children, have to prioritize high quality programming, and then as much as possible to do co-viewing, like watching it together with the child and engaging around the content watched. And it's not to say this is to be done all the time. But as much as possible to do it really helps. And then for older children, limiting it as possible to 2 hours at the total daily of video game play. Now, there's a caveat. So during vacation times and all that, yes, that 2 hour daily may be requested to increase. We'll come to that in a moment. And then that moment is smaller bits of multiple sessions rather than a long session is much better. That there is some research have shown that capping a play session around 45 minutes or so does help with some attention. It primes the attention for some tasks immediately after the video game play. It doesn't, we don't know. I don't think it sustains for days, but however, when kids are playing for longer than an hour and a half straight, their attention tasks immediately after that play tanks. So capping it around 45 minutes or so, setting up a timer, and when the 45 minutes is up, the kid then finishes whatever session they're in, or whatever mission they're in, or checkpoint, until they reach the next checkpoint, because these games are now unrelenting. They keep you playing and playing and playing. But so when they reach a available breakpoint, that's where you pause and then you do something else. In this way, playing multiple sessions, say 4 sessions of 45 minutes, is better than playing 180 minutes all at once. And as I mentioned, so with whom? 2 people needs to be looking at, 2 sets of eyes needs to be looking at the screen, or as much as possible. So, viewing a TV with a younger child, monitoring what the kid is doing online, with their social, following their social media, and making sure that's not a decoy social media account, and then do play with your child or children around you. And I worry less about a child who's playing with friends than a child who always plays alone. So playing together with a friend, it does seem to help with certainly the social bonding. It's a social experience, but there seems to be some more cognitive priming because of multiple information you have to process and go through while you're playing with a friend. Not only what you're seeing on screen, but what you're seeing or hearing and feeling right next to you, and you put that together. And it's a big cognitive task when you think of it. And so of course, monitoring the content, what they're playing, we need to know. And for do inform. We inform ourselves. We should inform ourselves about the video games that the kids are playing and accessing. And there are some resources like the ESRB, Entertainment Software Rating Board, is one. So they rate these games. But there are other websites there where these reviews and blogs occur. There's and so checking those about video game, about a movie, about a book, or whatever you'd like. You can see what other parents have thought about that, and what better way of informing yourself, and monitoring what the kid is doing online is important. And but when all is said and done, also is necessary to reflect how we at home as parents, how we are using, what is our attitude towards the social or electronic media, and because how we do and how we approach it, kids are like a sponge. They do the same. And whenever there's a new device coming home, please remember to keep an eye on their academic performance in the following 4 months after. And I think as a society, we have a lot of opportunities and much more power than we perhaps consider ourselves having. So why not ask for laws and regulations that require game developers, game developing companies to put out implement some reminders into the game that they are devising. So to advise about limiting the time spent on a game on screen, and have put together parent informational packages about how support these endeavors, and creating funding. We ask our legislators to create funding for research into benefits and risks associated with digital media use. It is here to stay, folks, as it's much more than a $200 billion industry, and only growing. Why not thinking of something like this, a warning that would pop up? There is, when you turn on a console, there is this warning about photogenic seizures. Yeah, why not maybe have a warning like this? I would humbly recommend. Now, all this, so this implies a change, right? And there are, just as there are two enemies of change. One is undue optimism. Like, I don't have to, it's going to work out, this is going to be fine. And staying hopeful, okay. And the other one is pessimism, like, whatever I do, it's not going to work. It's a uphill battle. Well, though both of them lead to inaction, inertia. That is, so undue optimism is not necessarily hope. Hope, or what triggers change is hope, is in the statement of, if and when I do this will happen. Knowing that, starting with realistic goals, and focusing on the duration and the location of the video game and electronic media access, then changes are going to happen. With that, I will remind that before I end this, it is the sleep, starting with sleep to address this, protect the sleep, and the location, the timing, and the duration of the media access are the components, or the parameters or circumstances that affect the sleep. So targeting these is the good way to start, as a good place to start from. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues and mentors, Dr. Kuttner, Olson, and Weigel, with whom I frequently talk about, discuss about this electronic media and what to do. And I'd like to remember my beloved mentor, Dr. Biederman, who we lost earlier this year. I thank you very much for your attention. And so I'd love to hear some questions. Certainly.
Thank you so much. We are now at the end of the session. If you have any questions to ask, please enter them in the chat.
Should I stop sharing?
Up to you.
Does that
Want to keep
interfere with-
that slide? That's helpful.
Okay.
So I have a question on privacy. What are your thoughts on balancing a child's, particularly a teen's, desire for privacy with the family's desire to stay informed about their media use?
So the privacy is something that needs to be afforded to a child, yes. And the old adage that with responsibility, well, freedom comes with responsibility, and responsibility brings more freedom. A frank conversation is necessary to start with, that where the online, if it is online, it's not private. It's public. There's no such thing online private. It's not private. So parents and caregivers, they should be given access to their child's online activity, as be able to follow what they're posting, right, as a follower, and making sure there are no decoy accounts. And if those are in place, then I think that's a good place to start from. True, a child's privacy is necessary and important, is a developmental task for a child to learn how to manage that. And as they are learning, though, there is, as the parent, need for still presence and oversight. Doesn't mean you have to see everything as single text that's sent and back and forth, but be able to have access to it. And the presence of that can be a really policing factor for the child.
Thank you. What are some tips to balance media use with other activities that don't involve screens?
So first off, we'll start with what the child is interested in. And a child interested in, let's say, playing a game that's about, either something that's science fiction or something historical, then exploring off game those areas, perhaps. So going to the museum where a related thing or exhibit might be, for that one. Another is for a child who is really resistant to do anything else, then still organizing, scheduling even if it's a hike away from the device and from the screen, is good to start from. And you will see that even when they're on a hike, like when you go on a hike, that the child is preoccupied with the game, thinking about the game, or talking about the game with a friend or the siblings or cousins, what have you, and that's okay. It's the kid is not in front of the screen and is doing something with like people in a three-dimensional way. So finding chasing a child's interests and strengths, and when necessary, even to push a child gently to do something different, but allowing them to stay preoccupied if that's what they're doing, so long as they're engaged in the activity. I think that would be a good place to start from.
Thank you so much. Did you have something to add?
No, I was wondering.
Okay. What are your thoughts on balancing media use for school-age kids who spend time on devices during school as part of their school curriculum, are also encouraged to spend time on learning apps after school and using screen time for fun?
Right. So it's thank you. So it matters why the screen is being used, right? So the the screen time that we mentioned about like 2 hours, that is not school or curriculum related screen use. No, that is separate. So it is, I think, reasonable to keep them separate, and but making sure that when the child is doing schoolwork on a device, the child is actually doing schoolwork on a device. When we were younger, we would have, yes, we're known to do this, right? Comic books in the book, pretend to read, and it's same thing. As you think the child is doing the math homework, and but you walk over and they're playing an online game that was just minimized, but you saw the glimpse of it. So making sure that is the activity. So the kid, if the kid is doing schoolwork, is really doing schoolwork, and the screen for fun or is separate, and that's where I would keep the limit, and I would keep these separate.
That's helpful. Thank you. And what are your thoughts on educational apps for younger kids like toddlers? Do you think they're beneficial at all? If so, at what age should they start using them?
So so far the research has not shown any significant benefit with with these educational apps or videos for toddlers, and so it really depends on, it really relies on for the child's development, the interaction with real adult parents and caregivers. That is the key. But educational apps and videos or what have you haven't shown any significant improvement.
Thank you.
That said, it is easier to start and establish rules around media use and access from a younger age. That the child growing with a rule, it's much easier to do than having a child who had grown not much with a rule and then later pose new, these rules. And it is not impossible. You can, anytime, it's never late, but it is best and easiest. It's easiest when started earlier.
Thank you. You presented some helpful data towards the beginning of your presentation on screen use during the pandemic, how it significantly increased. Now that people are returning to their normal lives in class learning, are there any more current data that reflect that?
Not that I'm aware of yet. No. But I think there is an overall recognition and in uptake in consultations for mental health services. More number of kids are seeking mental health counseling and services after the pandemic, and so that it is I think an outcome of us not having well prepared for return to new normal. That if we think of it as a disaster, for example, coming back from disaster to normal life, there are a lot of services and awareness in place for the new needs, lingering needs that people will experience. And I think as a society, we had treated, in some ways, return from COVID to school as if it is return from a long summer holiday. And so we now there is, in terms of to the question at hand, whether there is any change in the media use, we don't know yet, or I don't know yet. But I think the reason for increased mental health problems or seeking counseling and help, I think, is because we haven't really prepared well for this return. And I'm not I don't think that is necessarily related to electronic media itself, but I think it's a much bigger conversation and a much bigger problem,
Sure.
or a different problem.
Thank you. Do you feel that some children have a propensity regarding their personality traits to be more attached or drawn to social media than others?
There are some characteristics or some factors that seem to be associated with more likelihood of increased problems with media use or habits. One is the a history or diagnosis of ADHD has been found to be associated with more difficulty monitoring one's own game time or access time, and more difficulty coming off of that task, transitioning away from that task when prompted. And similarly, kids with autism spectrum sort of tend to have more difficulty transitioning away from the preferred activity. So there are, and anxiety problems and depression tend to, anxiety particularly tends to be more isolated use. Depression, similarly, actually, more isolated, like from pushes more or confounds this social isolation, and as a result, a byproduct of a increased engagement with the social media or electronic devices. So there are some characteristics that seem to fuel or pose a child to have more likelihood of a problem with media.
Thank you. So we have a couple more minutes. We'll see if there are any additional questions in the chat. While we wait, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, there are, so we, at MGH, we are in the process of putting out more information and informational videos on these topics. And please do check our website. Dr. Katz is the initiative that we are have started. Also, there are reliable informational websites in the field. American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, or acap.org. There are facts for families that touch upon or provide information and some guidance for parents and caregivers. So do look for these reliable resources and keep an eye, because information, the new findings keep coming up, and we update it as we go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for an informative session.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
And for everyone joining us today, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. As I had mentioned, today's session is being recorded. If you're interested in viewing the recording, you may visit the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day.